Welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown powered by SA Boxing Talk. We have a special guest besides Devin, Hayden, myself, and Cyril. We have David Isaacson, the well-respected journalist from the Sunday Times. David, welcome to our show. It's kind of a thing we've been thinking about doing, which we have been doing during COVID-19. And you're our special guest tonight, and you're the first one who is a guest on our show, so welcome. And how are you enjoying COVID-19? I mean, I wouldn't like to use the term enjoying, but how are you adapting to COVID-19 rather?
Yeah, don't have much choice about it. So just doing it and counting down. It's like a week to go now. So, and then we get hopefully reduced levels of restrictions.
Dave, we were talking earlier on the phone, and this is like quite a special occasion for me because normally you're the one asking me the questions, and tonight with the three other gentlemen, we're going to be asking you some questions as well. So, Cyril, evening, Devin, evening, Hayden, evening. Good to be with you guys again. Let's get straight into. We're talking about the greatest British boxers of the last 30 years, pound for pound. We got a list and we want to go through it. Hayden, let me start with you. Let me just get my list. And number one is Joe Calzaghe. Now, do you agree with that? Joe Calzaghe being pound for pound number one in the British boxing of the last 30 years. And why?
Absolutely. Undefeated, 46-0, beat the great Bernard Hopkins. He's got a Welsh heritage, not that it has anything to do with it. I've got Welsh heritage, but that's not a bias of anything. But Calzaghe's special, man. I mean, the list is as it is. I actually can't remember the 1 to 10 off by heart, but I know that no doubt Calzaghe is the best British fighter of all time.
So your opinion on Joe Calzaghe, I mean, really was good. If you think back to Byron Mitchell when he got put over for the first time in his career and then he got back up. And then, in the same round, I think it was it? Yeah. And he stopped him in a crazy title fight. He's got to be one of the greatest ever in super middleweight.
Definitely, I think top of my head, I can't think of anybody better than him at super middle. He is undoubtedly the best pound for pound fighter to come out of the UK. I don't think there's anybody that comes close to him. I think maybe Lennox Lewis, given that Lewis beat everybody he faced, but yeah, that's about it.
David, what would you say was Calzaghe's standout moment in his career? Which fight do you think put him there like, yep, he's great?
Sure. It's a difficult one to answer because I think was it the Bernard Hopkins fight was right at the end of his career.
Correct.
Which Hopkins was past his best, but he got dropped early in that fight, and he got up and then won it pretty comprehensively. So, I mean, I think that fight in a way lifted his profile, but I think he'd already done it, before then. I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not sure exactly which fight made him a superstar, because he really did serve his time there.
Well, also, if you think back, Devin, his standout fight was actually in his first world title, the vacant WBO super middleweight title against Chris Eubank, where he came out and he wasn't I don't know if he was an underdog, but he wasn't really supposed to dominate the way he did, and he won his first title.
Well, this is the thing that I want to allude to in terms of what the list is that we're looking now. The list that we're looking at here reads a top five of Calzaghe on number 1, Lennox Lewis at 2, Tyson Fury at 3, Hay at 4, and Ricky Hatton at 5. Now, Joe Calzaghe wins his first world title. He beats Chris Eubank Sr., but Eubank Sr. is only ranked at number 6, and I would definitely have Eubank Sr. above David Hay at number 4. So even though he beat Eubank and he won his first world title, according to this list, I have a little bit of a numerical problem with it because I don't think Hay, in his heyday, was better than Eubank Sr. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
Well, you need to also consider that Hay was an undisputed champion in the division. where Eubank wasn't. So if you break it down like that, and you also need to also think about that some of Eubank's decisions in his reign as WBO super middleweight champion were a little bit suspect. David, I don't know if you can come in here and agree with me. I mean, he came to South Africa, fought a guy called Dan Schomer, and he got the decision, but honestly, it was a close fight. It could have gone either way. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think a few of his decisions, I mean, he was like the one guy, he was a sky fighter. And I think
Correct.
Not just here, but in Britain as well, there were some dodgy decisions. I think even Sugar Boy could
Correct.
be
Decision, absolutely.
To have lost that decision to him as well. So, I actually, I agree with Dave that I don't agree with the order, but I was never a huge Eubank fan. I actually prefer, even though he didn't do better against Eubank, but I would have put Ben, just for the hell of it, above Eubank. I think I might even have put Nassim.
So Nigel Benn obviously is going to come into play because he's rated number 9 on this list. But if you consider that Eubank beat him for the vacant for the WBO middleweight title in Ben defending it, but in the rematch for Ben's for the unification at super middleweight, that fight was a draw. But Ben actually had a lot of momentum going, and I thought he actually won that fight. So I agree. I think Ben probably should be rated above Eubank. But let's move along to the second person, who is Lennox Lewis. Now, I've been watching the last few nights here on COVID-19, the rise and fall and the rise again of Lennox Lewis. And I want to talk about, which is very relevant because it was this week, where the second greatest upset in heavyweight boxing, probably next to Tyson and maybe Cassius and Sonny Liston, was the blunder, not the thunder in Africa, the blunder in Africa, where Lennox Lewis was supposed to come in and whack Hasim Rahman out, but got starched himself in 5 rounds, and in the rematch, knocked him out in 4 rounds, and it was a different Lennox Lewis. I mean, it was like comparing a Fiat to a Ferrari, and I just think he let it slip. And I remember listening to his interview, Cyril, where he said, I just cannot believe that happened. What's your take of the blunder in Africa for Lennox Lewis?
I think Lennox Lewis came into the fight. I think he underestimated Rahman a little bit, and he got caught. And it's the heavyweight division. You get caught, he could end the fight. So yeah, and he definitely fixed it. He got it right in the second time around. And you look at it, every rematch Lewis has had, he won those rematches, which is quite spectacular.
Dev, let me ask you, there's some people that say that Lewis was the best heavyweight of the 90s. Do you agree with that or not?
I
know it's a bit of a curveball, but I mean, Holyfield was good, but he wasn't dominant. Where Lennox had his losses, but he was dominant. He came back and he reclaimed them, and he had some good defenses. And I suppose the early 2000s as well. David Tour, Michael Grant, there were good fights and good defenses of his title. Personally, Dev, I've got to be honest with you, I never enjoyed Lennox's reign. I never did. But he retired, and the Klitschko's came along, and all of a sudden I miss Lennox Lewis. So that puts it in perspective. Your take on that?
My take on that sort of thing is always going to be down to the level of opposition that you're fighting back in that day. So for him to be dominant among a group of heavyweights who I would say certainly were a cut above what most of the Klitschko's faced in their reign in the early 2000s and onwards, you'd probably have to agree with that to quite a large degree that Lewis was the best of the crop in terms of his dominance, in terms of the names that he was banging out. I mean, could you ever think of what would have happened in a fight between Vladimir Klitschko and David Tour, or any of those kinds of opponents that you're going to try and compare it to? Because I know Dave's going to slide in Vladimir Klitschko before the night is out in terms of something that we didn't really all realize before this podcast started. So, yeah, I could tend to agree with that to a large degree, but there's always room for niggle and there's always room for an argument there.
Okay, Hayden, I mean, let me just ask you, the careers aren't over with Tyson Fury, and Lennox Lewis's career is. But Lennox is number 2, Fury's number 3. Who wins that fight and why, if they ever had to fight?
Ooh.
And who do you think? Oh, no, hold on. No, forget about that question. Who is the better heavyweight? Bearing in mind, we know Fury hasn't finished his career yet, but who is the better heavyweight in your opinion?
Yeah,
Lennox Lewis.
It's a hard one because, I mean, Tyson Fury hasn't faced adversity yet, you know, whereas Lennox, we saw him come back from every adversity he faced. You know, that's something, you know.
But hold on. Didn't he get dropped and get a draw before he got the stoppage win over Deontay Wilder? Wouldn't you call that adversity?
Oh, I would call that adversity, but in saying that, he got up and he won the fight and he was well ahead in that fight anyway. I mean, the 2 rounds in which Wilder did drop him were probably the only rounds that Wilder won in that fight. So I don't know how much adversity he faced in terms of that. You know, Lennox obviously had a huge step up in competition as opposed to Tyson Fury had. So, I mean, building yourself. I do agree that Tyson Fury is a special boxer and he will go down as a pound-for-pound British boxer of all time. I just don't think that he would beat Lennox Lewis.
David, let me ask you. David Hay, number 4, Ricky Hatton, number 5. You would think, for me, I would have thought Ricky Hatton would have been above him. Do you agree with that, or you don't?
I think. I think Hatton. I'm actually inclined, maybe controversially, to actually put Prince Nassim above Hatton. Hatton, I think, got lucky against a very old Costa Zoo. And yeah, like once you take Costa Zoo out, Castillo was also past his best, I think, you know, and yeah, he doesn't really do it for me. Whereas Naz, even when he lost to Pereira, he always looked like he was the stronger of the 2 fighters. And he lost that fight mentally. I think physically he was definitely in it. And he really did do some amazing things, even though I also didn't really enjoy him. But I'm inclined to put him above Ricky Hatton.
To be honest with you, I actually wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, remember, he cleaned up the division pretty much. He wasn't unified champion, but that was because of politics. But he always held on to the WBO strap. But he did win the WBC. He did win the WBA. He did win the IBF. I mean, he really did clean up the featherweight division at one point. Hayden, do you remember when my question was, how do you regard the Prince, considering he fought our very own Vianney Bungu in March 2000, I think it was, Dave? Yeah, it was, March 2000. When he came out on the carpet ride, remember?
The carpet ride. Yeah. Oh, you asking me?
Yeah, no, you, Cyril.
Yeah, that was, I think, Vianney Bungu lost that fight before the opening bell. As soon as you saw Nassim coming through on that magic carpet, he was a special fighter. That was Nassim, entertaining as well. He had that charisma about him outside the ring. He could sell fights. He was a showman through and through. And yeah, maybe you could actually put him above Ricky Hatton as in pound for pound stakes. Although Ricky Hatton was pretty special himself, given that, you know, he only really, his real losses were against Mayweather and Pacquiao, who everybody loses to those. I mean, sure, he lost to, I think it was Shevchenko as well, but that was like after coming out of retirement. So yeah, I think Prince Ahmed was quite a special fighter.
Guys, I just want to go through the list again. So number 1, they've got Joe Calzaghe. Number 2, Lennox Lewis. 3, Tyson Fury. 4, David Hay. 5, Ricky Hatton. 6, Chris Eubanks Sr. Number 7, Prince Nassim Hamid. We've discussed all 7 guys. I want to get to number 8, and that's a little bit of a surprise, and I'm going to tell you guys why it's a surprise. Well, why it actually isn't a surprise. You got Duke McKenzie at number 8. Now, there have only been 3 British fighters in boxing history to win titles in 3 different divisions. Duke McKenzie was 1. And can any of you other gentlemen tell me who the other 2 were?
Amir Khan. Didn't Amir Khan win it light?
Not 3 ways. Not 3-way categories. So I'm going to tell you. Bob Fitzsimmons, and this one's going to really get to you because it's quite recent, is Ricky Burns.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Ricky Burns.
So I think Duke McKenzie's on this list. And I mean, remember, David, many moons ago, he was actually, I believe, the IBF flyweight champion. And then he moved up to bantam, and then he moved up to junior feather. And if my memory serves me right, I think he lost by KO to Rafael.
That's right.
He came to South Africa to challenge Vianney Bunga, but had a water cyst on his nose and was failed medically. There was a boil. Was there a boil? There was a boil. But he wasn't allowed to fight. And I remember the promoter at the time being furious at it because they should have instructed the promoter that he wasn't eligible to fight because of this. It was a boil. There was something like that. Am I right, David?
Yo, you testing my memory of it too much there, Colin.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I remember that actually. So, but Duke McKenzie definitely has his place in the last 30 years for British boxing. Obviously, he was also a great fighter. After the IBF version of him winning the flyweight championship, and I think he lost the title to Dave McCauley, who fought our very own baby Jake McClellan. I think. I stand to be corrected. But three-weight world champion, definite boxing legend for UK boxing. And then let's talk about number 9, Nigel Benn, the Dark Destroyer. Obviously connected to South Africa due to Tulani Sugarboy Malinga. Beat him the first fight, lost the second fight. Hayden, your opinion of the Dark Destroyer?
Yeah, Nigel Benn, obviously, he stands out for me, particularly his wars against Chris Eubank Sr. I think when I go back and, I watch the videos, I read the books. I mean, those fights are the ones that are spoken about there. There's huge rivalry between the two of them. I mean, they've even produced kids that are now boxers as well. So they got a bit of lineage, and they're a part of boxing history. And I don't know if number 9 is appropriate. I would have probably maybe shifted them down to like number 7 or so. I feel like it's too far back.
David, let me ask you: Do you think? Because I think it must have affected him mentally. His fight with Gerald McClellan, he was never the same again.
Yeah, Colin, I think so. Hey, because he really was a destroyer at one point, and if you think of what like he did to someone like Iran Barkley.
She drilled him in one round. I mean, it's 3 knockdowns. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah. But then, I mean, he went and got stopped by Eubank in his next fight. So, yeah, I think, but, I'm sure something like that does have a massive effect on a boxer. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did affect him, if it did may possibly make him hold back a little bit in a couple of his fights after that.
Cyril and Devin, I'm going to leave this one for you guys. Anthony Joshua. Now, let me ask you, Dev. The fact that he's number 10 and Fury's number 3, you think that loss against Ruiz hurt Joshua? Do you think it would be a different story if he still was unbeaten and if he never lost to Ruiz? Do you think he'd be a lot higher than number 10?
I think you can guarantee he would be a lot higher than number 10. But then I'd also like to ask, just because we haven't really commented, where did this list actually come from? Where was it published?
So I personally want to take no responsibility. None of us on the show can take full responsibility. In fact, any responsibility. We were thinking about boxing topics, and Hayden suggested this, and he got it from somewhere. Hayden, where did you pick this up from?
Some random Twitter accounts, I'll be honest.
Yeah, okay. So we take absolutely no responsibility for this list or order.
This is not approved by the FDA.
We're just talking randomly anyway. Cyril, do you think? Here's the thing. Do you think Joshua has had a better career, or has Fury had a better career, and why?
I think Fury's had a better career. I think the Fury's win over Wilder is a bit of an exclamation mark. Also, if you look at they both fought Vladimir Klitschko, whereas when Joshua was in trouble against Klitschko, Fury coasted through the fight. He won comfortably against
Yeah,
Klitschko
really.
at a time when nobody thought he could beat Klitschko. So,
Right.
so yeah, I think Fury. I've never seen Fury. Fury's only been in trouble when he got dropped by Wilder, which I mean, it was like that one split second when you get those two occasions when he got caught. Whereas we've seen Joshua in trouble a few times in his fights, even in fights that he has won. So yeah, I think definitely Fury has had a better career.
Okay, gentlemen, let's move on from the random mythical top 10 pound for pound in the last 30 years for the UK boxing. We're going to be talking about South African fights that have really captured the imagination of the five of us. David, let me start with you, and obviously we can go back as far as we want to because we can. What would be one memorable fight between two South Africans? Sorry, the idea is to have your favorite fight with two South Africans that have fought and the significance of it and why. Let me start with you, Mr. Isaacson.
Okay, well, there are two fights that come to mind. The one is Scarly against Makapula, particularly their first fight. And Scarly won the fight on points, majority decision. But what made it interesting, of all the fighters that every South African fought that year, Makapula was the highest ranked opponent for any South African, even though he was South African. So that was like a big win in a way for Scarly. And the other fight, which I put in there for sheer entertainment, although he was past his best, but Botile against Baloy was a very, very enthralling fight where Botile was leading until he kind of ran out of steam, basically, and Baloy came back and stopped him, I think, in the 10th round.
10th or 11th round, he took a hard shot, turned, and he basically cowered and quit. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And you had to sort of wonder what would have happened if they'd fought a few years earlier, if Botile was still, in the game as such. That certainly was a very interesting fight.
Cyril, your favorite fight locally that happened and why?
I think once again Cassius Baloy against Philip Doe. Yeah, I think Baloy was in a few fights that were of significance. Against Philip Doe, I think that was basically to say this is the main man in that division, who going forward in terms of world titles as well in terms of world ratings. I mean, you remember after Philip Doe went on to fight Mayweather, so that was definitely one of my favorite fights. It was in terms of entertainment as well. It was good on the eye. It's easy, good to watch.
Devin, your favorite local matchup and why?
Yeah, I'm going to go exactly with what Cyril said, Baloy versus Ndou, because also everyone thought at the time that Ndou was just some kind of a banger, not much of a classical boxer, and he turned everybody's opinion against that complete misconception that he couldn't box, and he stood there and he boxed. But it was also at a time where it's got to be said, Nick Durant had some of the hottest fighters in the country coming in and out of his gym. Now, my memory serves me correctly. Colin, I know you're going to help me out here. Which fight was it involving Baloy that one of the other opponents had to leave Nick Durant's gym in order to take that fight because he couldn't train them both?
That was in 2009 or 2000. Hold on, that was 2008 with Malcolm Claassen and Cassius Baloy. And funny enough, that was one of my next questions, or basically comments. In the early 2000s, we had some great rivalry for the IBF Championship, the Junior Lightweight Championship. You had Mzonke Fana, Cassius Baloy, created a lot of excitement. But you also had Malcolm Claassen going to Khayelitsha to defend his championship against Mzonke Fana, who was, Claassen at the time was a heavy favorite going in, then he got upset against Fana. Fana losing it to Baloy. Claassen re-establishing himself for Cassius Baloy and won the championship. Hayden, do you think we could ever see that kind of rivalry again with a legitimate world sanctioning body with South Africans, almost like a round robin fighting eliminators and contesting for that?
Most certainly, I actually can. Funny enough, particularly with the whole IBF situation, Rumble Africa promotions, they're putting on a lot of, particularly in the smaller weight divisions, I'll put it that way. I don't think we'll see it amongst the sort of the heavier weight divisions, but with the smaller guys, I can particularly see it. There are a couple of guys that are on a sort of a crash course going towards each other, almost climbing those rankings really, really quickly because they're being pushed to fight like top level Mexican fighters, Filipinos. And obviously that's what makes up most of the smaller weight divisions is Asia and obviously Central America. So they're pushing, and you might find a stage where we might even see, like, if DJ Krill goes on to win the title, Sibin Onchinga against DJ Krill. Can you imagine that situation? I mean, we could definitely see it.
Guys, I'm gonna throw the last question to you four gentlemen, and it's a bit of a curveball, so I want you to think about it quickly. The biggest waste of time in a fight that happened in South Africa in a boxing ring. And I'm going to start it off by saying Layla Ali coming to South Africa, knocking out her opponent in the first round. To me, it was, that was my fight. If I have to think about one fight that just made no sense, it was probably Layla Ali. Even though she trained in my gym and it was a great time and she was just a great athlete, but she was just completely, her opponent I think it was a rematch, and I think she blew out in one round. David, let me ask you, the one fight in your memory that was a complete waste of time in a South African ring.
Yeah. Colin?
Okay, we'll come back to you. Cyril, how about you? Guys, I know it's a curveball. I'm sorry.
I got you.
Top of my head, Corey Saunders, the late Corey Saunders against Osborne Machiman.
Funny enough, I was thinking about that. Correct. Yeah. And why in your opinion, was it?
I thought, I think Corey Saunders had been retired for a while when he came back for that fight. Yeah. There was nothing in it for him. There was nothing for him to prove. He was a legend already, a former world champion with a win over Vladimir Klitschko. He got in, and I think as soon as he got hurt a little bit in the fight, it was over. It wasn't great to see. It wasn't, it wasn't a great fight.
Yeah. It was also, I think Mike Tyson was out here for that weekend as well. So, very upset, a very sad way to see a legitimate heavyweight great go out like that. Devin, your one fight in South African boxing on a South African ring that you thought waste of time, made no sense.
Francois Botha against Michael Grant, and I know Howard Goldberg's going to hate me because it was for his world title, but to be honest, in the scheme of things in the rest of the world, it was completely meaningless. I know it sold well. I think it did well enough at Monte Cassino, if I remember correctly, it was. But when that got announced, I was like, Michael Grant, what's he got left? Francois Botha, he dominated Flo Simba a little bit later, but, that's not to say that he was on a world title march of any kind. So that's the one that kind of immediately springs to mind without me thinking about it too much because, as you said, it was a curveball. Sharp Powell.
Pleasure. Hayden, your one fight in a South African ring that you shook your head and thought it makes no sense.
Yeah, most recently, Justice Saliga against Ruan Visser. That fight boggles my mind. It really, it doesn't sit well with just how easy, Justice went down in that fight. It didn't sit well with me.
Right. David, you've had time to think. What was the one fight, in your opinion, in a South African ring that you shook your head and said that just didn't make sense?
Sure. You could choose quite a few fights, actually.
Okay, so choose them all. Come, we have time. You'll be that'll be the last question for you.
Was it Butile against Anthony Chekler?
Yeah, for the WBA Pan-African Championship, yep.
I think it was one round or something, which, really, it was, I don't know, if you think that Butile was a classy fighter, and for him to have been shut out like that, also way past his sell-by date at that point. And so, yeah, that's, but I mean, those type of things are actually pretty frequent in boxing. So, people never get out, very seldom get out when they should.
Right, guys, I tell you what we're going to do. It's been your last parting shot for the show. Devin, let me start with you.
Well, as we all know, the president's going to slowly but surely let us get back to work. But for boxing and gym and sports in general, I think we'll see you sometime down towards the end of the year. Unfortunately, it sucks. And obviously, internationally is all going to be going according to their presidents and what their rules are. So that could also be just as staggered. So there might not be nothing coming out of America or the UK or South Africa for the foreseeable future. And that's a very worrying sign.
Hayden, your last parting shot before we say cheers.
Yeah, actually, my most anticipated fight locally between two South Africans actually happened between Indo versus Indo. I actually really enjoyed the build-up to that fight. The whole South African-Australian thing that was going on really made things interesting and had you either going for one or the other. There was a lot of emotional attachment. And, you might have gone into that fight thinking that, Lovemore Indo was the sort of the guy to be hated, but you ended up loving him afterwards. That's the type of fight it was. That's just my parting shot, yeah.
Cyril, your parting shot.
As Stephen said, it's might be a while before we see any action in the ring. So I think whoever can get hold of any old footage, keep watching that.
David, our guest for tonight's show, your last parting shot for everyone.
As hard as it is having no fights for the next however long, it's still an opportunity for a lot of boxers to actually get fresh, not just boxing, all sports actually. And it's the same for everyone. No one's at a greater disadvantage really. And hopefully we will get to see some great local matchups in the hopefully not too distant future.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I really do. Dave, thanks for joining us on the Boxing Lockdown. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure hanging with you guys. To the viewers, thanks for tuning in and watching. Stay safe. And we will catch you again soon. From all of us here on the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk, we will see you again soon.